For that insightful statement. As mentioned earlier on, we are now opening it to the floor for questions. Apologies, I hadn't fully introduced myself. You just heard that I'm Linda. My full name is Linda Mzenda. I'm the Operations Director for the Build Zimbabwe Alliance. So as mentioned earlier, when you're given the floor, when you're given the microphone, could you kindly introduce yourself and your official affiliation? Thank you. Questions?
I can do without,
Okay.
My name is Peter Mutanda from ZimdiTv. I understand what Dr. Manyika has just said, and we also understand all our ambitions. But my question is, are you willing to engage in a coalition? Because that's the talk of the day right now.
Well, you know what, I'm on record as saying that we're not opposed to a coalition. I'm on record as actually saying that. But there's something that I really want to emphasize. Zimbabwe deserves, in 2018, to have a government that will deliver. And I think that self-serving talk among politicians about who is going to be placed in what position does not do the Zimbabwean people any favor. Right now, everybody should be put to the test, including those who have been around for a long time in the opposition, including those who are coming in just now, including the people who have been ruling. Every single politician has to be put to the test, and every single political formation has to be put to the test by the people. And some of the questions that every political formation, even before we start talking about a coalition, has to answer is, are you committed to making sure that in 2018 we have absolutely the right leadership from top to bottom? Not leaders who are selected because they've been in the party structures for a long time or they've passed the loyalty test. You must ask as a citizen, and I'm saying this even to you as journalists, you must ask every single political formation, are you committed to making sure that we have the kinds of people who can deliver? If you look at the political tradition of our country, how political formations have been established, and how leaders are selected to even run for MP, or, by the way, the very, very important office of councillor. Those are the people who are responsible for service delivery. So when you see in Mfakose, a sewer that has actually been spewing out sewage onto the streets for the past 30 years, it's not the MP, by the way, it's the councillors of those areas who have not done their job. So I would say to you, and I really want to say this to all Zimbabweans, insist that politicians don't go to some country club somewhere and come up with an arrangement about who is going to lead this coalition. You know what, if I come in, you're going to be the vice president, you are going to be this and so, when it has nothing to do with competence. And I am going to insist myself, as a citizen now, not even as a politician, but as a citizen, if we are going to talk, we have to make sure, one, we have a winning coalition that can actually inspire Zimbabweans out of the apathy that they have. I mean, think about this. Zimbabweans, there are a lot of Zimbabweans who are not even registered to vote. And part of the reason why some are not even registered to vote is because they're not inspired by our leadership. And you have to have the kind of leadership that will inspire the young people to vote, which is the largest demographic that we have right now. You have to have the kind of leadership that inspires even the people who are dejected to say, you know what, we really believe that these people can solve our problems. So before we get to the talk about the coalition, I'm actually inviting the Zimbabwean people to even test us as Build Zimbabwe Alliance. What is it that we're presenting to you? And if what we're saying doesn't resonate to you, or we don't even have prospects of actually solving the problems of this country, you shouldn't vote for us. But if, purely on the basis of merit, we are actually presenting to the Zimbabwean people what can actually solve our problems, then you should vote for us.
Thank you.
I'm Everson Mshava Newsday. Dr. Manyika seems to be new in the field, and most people would want to know who Dr. Manyika is.
Well, thank you so much. When our country became independent in 1980, I was a teenager, full of hope, as most of us were. And I had the good fortune of being selected as one of 65 young people to be trained at the newly established Institute of Mass Communication. So I was in your trade, by the way. Some of the first people at Independence to actually be trained to become journalists, because our government had actually taken over the mass media holdings of the Rhodesian government. So this was at that point when they were now trying to fill those positions with their own people. And after I finished my training, I was then sent to Romania, which is an interesting story, which is actually where I really got my awakening that, you know, something was wrong with the direction that our country was going in, because I couldn't understand how, we could emulate what was happening in a country which had one of the most vicious dictatorships in the history of mankind. And I was supposed to train there as a journalist, and then I did for 3 years, and I really thank God that I went to Romania, because it really opened my eyes and it gave me a different worldview. Then I went from there to the United States, and I went to Georgetown University, where I got my master's in foreign service or in diplomacy. And then later on, I got my PhD in Christian leadership. I'm married to one wife. I have 3 wonderful children, 3 girls and 1 son. And for the past 20 years, I've been working in at-risk communities, not just in the United States, but here, trying to create opportunities for people who are hopeless to really be engaged in the productive sector and find themselves and prosper. And it is some of that work that we have been doing for the past several years in the United States, and then some work that I was also doing here that I feel has prepared us even to do what we're doing now. Between 2009 and 2013, I was asked by the GNU to help them develop programs for national healing. And I did that with them, and working with all parties, and like most Zimbabweans, was very, very hopeful that that period in the history of our country would lead us to finding each other, and we would get over this pettiness in our political system, and even allow in 2013 a level playing field, so that whatever the Zimbabwean people actually desired would be the outcome of the election. And like most people, I was disappointed, not because I felt that we should predetermine the outcome of that election, but I really didn't feel that we have moved forward to really being seriously engaged at every level in making sure that we have the leadership that can rebuild our country. In my other life, I'm a pastor, and I love what I've been called to do, but this is what I'm focused on right now, to make sure that we can have political change in 2018, but also have the kind of leadership in place that can bring change to our country.
A follow-up question. There have been some unconfirmed reports that you have been working for the Central Intelligence Organization, and the suspicion among even other opposition political parties that your build Zimbabwe could be an intelligence project. What could be your response to that?
I think that's the biggest insult to Mr. Morgan Tsvangirai ever. Let me tell you why I say that. And I think we should get over this as Zimbabweans, casting aspersions every time somebody comes into play. Remember that the MDC came out of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, which was an ally of ZANU-PF. Is that right? And after a while, they decided that, things were not working. And the MDC came out of that. By the way, the ZCTU used to be led by Albert Mugabe, who was President Mugabe's brother. So why do I say that when people say that about me, that's actually insulting Morgan Tsvangirai? I say that because I've never served in ZANU-PF. I've never held office in ZANU-PF. I have never held a card from ZANU-PF. There are people in the opposition who have. And we receive them on the basis of merit, not on the basis of where they came from. So, I'm not going to dignify the things that people say who actually themselves might be from the Central Intelligence Organization. I have no way to confirm that the people who say that are themselves not a ZANU-PF project. So I'm not going to be preoccupied with that. Look, the Zimbabwean people know what they are going through. They know. They know the potholes that are out there. They know if you go right now to Headcliff and you see what is going on, that there hasn't been running water in some of those communities for the past, I don't know, 15 years. They know. And when it rains, that some of the sewage flowing on the streets is actually going into the wells that people have dug, and then people drink it. And they actually don't have medical attention to deal with the consequences of that. They know that. I think I'm old enough and have gone through enough to understand the preoccupation that people who are themselves not doing anything have with pulling those who are actually stepping to the plate up. So yeah, it's the biggest insult to Morgan Tsvangirai when you say someone who has never actually worked for the government, has never held a ZANU-PF card, is actually working for the government. Because people like Tsvangirai actually have a record of having partners with ZANU-PF. But we don't dismiss that, we don't hold that against them. Because we realize that, hey, you know what? You work in the system and you get your awakening, and you come out and you say, look, I know what goes on in there. It's time for us to change. Let me just add another thing. I actually think that is that preoccupation with casting aspersions that has caused us to be in the mess that we are in for 37 years. Because there were people early on in the history of Zimbabwe who tried to warn us. One of them was Justice Enoch Tumbuchena. He was the Chief Justice of this country, well, and a ZANU-PF member. And they came out and they said, look guys, we need to wake up. Where we are going, this government is really going to repress civil liberties. And all of us said, Tumbuchena, and we laughed at the jokes that were said about him, from the highest office. Tegere came along and said the same things. And someone said, Tegere, he must be used by ZANU-PF. And then there were jokes about him, there's no paying that yet, and so on. And we laughed. And we have an increasing number of people who have been warning us about where we are going as a country, and then, and then there are these, aspersions that are cast. But you know what? It doesn't faze us.
Mine is on your proposal that you have 14 cabinet ministers without deputies.
Yeah.
With the one vice president. Can you explain to us the concept which you are trying to achieve?
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? If you have been around the politics of Zimbabwe long enough, you will know that at some point, when someone does something and they need to be rewarded by ZANU-PF, a ministry is created. The last one was the Ministry of War Veterans. What's that? Yeah, psychomotor, right? So if somebody is an ardent supporter of the system, they are rewarded with a ministry, not which exists, no. A ministry is actually created. And you know what? The Zimbabwean people need to understand the implications of that. You don't just appoint a minister and you're just paying the salary of a minister. There is a whole support structure under that. And this has been going on, guys, for the past 37 years. Every time that, there is a cabinet reshuffle, a new ministry is created, and a whole structure which drains the public fiscus is actually created at the expense of the productive sector. And if you look, I've not seen, when I look at the ministry that we've had, any justification for most of them. A lot of those ministries are actually supposed to be commissions headed by competent people and a board of able citizens, supervising them. So we looked at the ministries that we have, which is over 30 ministries. And what we came to is that, look, Zimbabwe needs basic ministries, and turn all those other ministries into government agencies or commissions. And make sure that these ministers who are there are competent people, not people who are simply being rewarded because they did something, for the party. And that's something. Think about this. Isn't it really an insult to the war veterans that a Ministry of Veterans Affairs is only being formed 30-something years after independence? Why now? And you remember that this was also in the context of the succession battles in ZANU-PF. and then somebody did something and was, okay, now we have a Ministry of Veterans Affairs. You can't have that. You need a lean, mean fighting machine to correct the problems that we have in this country. And deputy minister positions, you know, some of the people who run these ministries are permanent secretaries, really. The deputy ministry positions, in my view, are also another way to actually accommodate loyalists in the party. And they really should be done away with, because some of these guys, if you ask them, what do you really do? And this is the thing that I'm encouraging the Zimbabwean people to really be on top of. Ask this, what is it that you really do? What is it? And that should actually be reflected when you travel around and you go to the different communities and so on, and you see the brokenness of some of our countries, and you see these guys coming in and beautiful suits and in Mercedes-Benz and with bodyguards and everything. It is high time we as a people asked, what do you do? Well, let me use this opportunity to go on to another pet peeve of mine, which is in 2013, even the opposition parties accepting that we should have an expansion of our legislature from 150 to over 300. And you ask yourself and you say, what was the rationale for that? What that means is that in every province, you have over 30 representatives of central government which are being paid from the public fiscus. What justifies that? You know? So one of the things that you're going to find, and I'm very serious about this, and I've been saying this even to those who are aspiring to run as Build Zimbabwe Alliance candidates, that you are going to have to make the very difficult decision at some point during the life of the next parliament to actually vote and say, eliminate my seat. Because my seat is not important for my province. And that is something that we must do for the sake of the Zimbabwean people, so we can actually have governments in the legislature that delivers.
My name is Robert Atafmani. I'm a freelance journalist. From your profile and from what I've been reading, you are based in USA. Zimbabweans are tired of a visiting president, the sitting one. What is your position on that? Are you planning to relocate, or are you going to visit Zimbabwe when you're in office like the current one?
I like that. Robert, I am in Zimbabwe. I've moved back home. I'm here now. But let me also take this opportunity to then talk about another subject of mine, which is of interest to me, which is the role of the diaspora in rebuilding our country. I think what has happened, particularly in the past 20 years, is the continued dividing of the Zimbabwean people, and the suggestion that there are some people who are more relevant to the process of rebuilding our country than others. That's a very, very dangerous thing, because Zimbabwe needs everyone. Zimbabwe needs the competencies of everyone called a Zimbabwean. Black, white, Shona Ndebele, Ndau, whatever language you speak, as long as you are a Zimbabwean, you can actually help rebuild this country. So there's this, I think, idea that only the people who have never left the country should be the ones to actually participate, because they are the only ones who experience our suffering. I couldn't compare my suffering with a person who has always been here and has never left the country, because I've had opportunities that other people haven't had. But I want to tell you that there is no Zimbabwean, wherever they are in the world, who is not affected by the dysfunction in our country. Nobody. If you think about it, those who left, they left and they said, you know what, I'll pack myself over there with my kids and everything. Then 2008 came, and their parents, who struggled so much to educate them, but had actually made provision for themselves. They had a pension that they paid into, they had a medical aid card and everything, and their lives were set. They even had 1 or 2 or 3 houses and so on. And then all of a sudden, push, all your savings disappear in 2008. These are the parents who have remained here, right? The savings disappear in 2008. And some of these parents now start liquidating assets that they had actually built up so that they could have a safe retirement. Start selling their homes, and so one by one, until maybe now they have one house. and things just don't add up, and the pension that they receive now is worthless. They now don't even have medical aid and so on. Now that burden starts falling on the people who have what? Left, right? And you start being the, the retirement fund, the pension fund for your parents. And every time there is something that goes on, somebody dies and everything, I mean, you have to come up with that. Listen, I truly believe that there is a cost to every single Zimbabwean. This dysfunction that we have in our country costs every single Zimbabwean something. And by the way, they may deny the diaspora the vote, but the single most inflow of money is coming from diaspora remittances. They're keeping even this government going because there is money coming from outside. So I would like to say, yeah, I'm not ashamed of the fact that I'm coming from the diaspora. I'm a Zimbabwean, I'm not ashamed of that.
The issue of land and indigenization have been singled out as the major culprits in the economic situation which we now have. Can you clarify on your party's policy on those on land reform and indigenization?
Thank you. So one of the things that we have said as New Zimbabwe, and I think you will see it as we continue sharing with you what our party platforms are, is that the biggest problem that we have in Zimbabwe is a lack of common sense when it comes to making policy. What you're actually going to find is that there's nobody who, there may be a few, who may say there was no justification at all when it comes to looking at the redistribution of land situation. There are a few. But I was talking to even some of our white counterparts who were saying, you know what, we understand that something needed to be done. Because if you're old enough or you're a student of history long enough, you will remember that there was something called the Land Tenure Act or the Land Apportionment Act, which actually caused land to be, people who were on productive land, who were Africans, to actually be removed. And that land to be set aside as commercial land or actually given to mainly the white population in Rhodesia at that time. And then the tribal trust lands were actually created where millions of people were actually put on non-productive land. So we all know that, and we all know that that was part of the reason why there was actually a liberation struggle. Some of us remember the stories of Rekaita Mwena and his people fighting for the land that the government wanted to take from them. So there is no doubt that there's a historical reason to actually redress that. The problem that we have in our country is that we make important decisions to score political points. And we do not bother to actually have a national conversation about some of these things. So in the end, we write a historic injustice and kill our economy. That's silly. Because if you look at it, there are towns in this country whose existence is based on the productivity in the agricultural sector. So let me give you an example which, you know, some might think is that's a silly example, but it's such an important example. Gweru has butter shoe company. What does butter shoe company depend on? It depends on the hides that come from the ranches around Gweru, right? And butter shoe company provides employment and is most probably one of the reasons, along with Zim Alloys and others, and Zimglass, why townships like Mkoba actually exist. Those townships didn't just get built. They were actually built for people who worked at butter or Zim Alloys or some of those. So now if you affect the farm, which produces the hide that sustains butter, then you're actually creating unemployment. So some of these political decisions must actually be made in a very thoughtful way. How do we address these historic injustices while at the same time preserving our economy? And I don't believe that we have had a government that has done that. Now going forward, we also must have that kind of mindset. Okay, now how do we now correct these errors that this government has made, right? While reviving our economy. Because at the end of the day, we must revive agricultural production. And the idea that people could have however many farms that they have, which they actually don't use, is criminal. And the people of Zimbabwe must insist on that land audit, which really reveals who has these farms and what are they doing with it. So the position of our party is we need to know exactly who has what. And when we found out who has what, we need, as a government, if the people of Zimbabwe give us that opportunity to come in, to seriously think through how we can set aside some land as commercial agricultural land. And that if somebody then actually gets that land, they must actually justify their ownership of it by actually producing. The other thing is, we have to restore the ownership of land so that people can actually have free title. Because if they don't, then whatever asset they have is not bankable. Now, how do you build a support system for agriculture if the main asset of the person who is a farmer is not bankable? Well, you know, you can't. So if we want to actually be able to bring capital into commercial agriculture again, we will actually have to make this asset called land bankable again. And that is really across the board. When it comes to indigenization of companies and so on, again, we've done the same thing. Yeah, we want our people to participate in, in manufacturing and everything, and we said, well, you know what? Then if somebody has a company, somebody who really doesn't even have a passion for that particular industry, come and own majority ownership in that, that's crazy. Every country has a form of indigenization. It's not just Zimbabwe. But other countries, their forms of indigenization make economic sense. Ours doesn't. And we're committed to actually making sure that they do.
Iso maZimbabweans tajaira kupiwa, especially pa panguwa ino yema elections yatatarisana nayo. Imise Build Zimbabwe Alliance muno tipawo chi.
And single election tagatarisa zvatinoita sei? Tajara upiwa. Rice nezvimwe zvakadaro. That's actually a good question, because one of the things that we are committed to in Zimbabwe is to change our political culture. I think our people have been insulted for a very long time. Achinzi, you know what? All you have to do is bribe them close to the election. As a party, that's not something that we are interested in doing. We are really interested in appealing to the minds and hearts of Zimbabweans, to say, actually, the things that you're given at election time, they don't last. What you need is a country that actually functions. where you can actually, you know, all the stuff that you do in your fields, if you actually, you know, have a maize crop and you take it to the GMB actually pays you. You actually get money for your efforts. We're saying to the Zimbabwean people, what you need is a country where graduates can actually be employed. Because bribing people with seeds and so on just before the election does not create jobs for the graduates who are coming from the University of Zimbabwe. It doesn't. And I really believe that the Zimbabwean people are actually do have common sense. They actually know, I think, that this doesn't work. And if somebody comes and wants to bless you with seeds, take the seeds. If someone wants to bless you with rice, take the rice. If somebody wants to bless you with whatever they want to bless you with, take it and eat it. But when you get to the election, in that election booth, vote for your future. Vote for your children. Vote for the development of your community. You know, we were in Heathcliff the other day. I've been to Heathcliff before. But you know what happens a lot of times when you get into a community, there are some things that you don't see because maybe you're on a different agenda. I was there actually donating some material to build a school. And we were driven to the place where we're going to, you know, build these shelters and everything. But there were some things that we didn't see. I want to encourage you as Zimbabweans to see things that you have never chosen to see. Go this time to Heathcliff to really see the state in which people live. When you find that, you know, now there is no water system at all, and everyone has to have a well, and then you have to buy water, and this is, you know, it's not just Heathcliff. Mbare, my uncle used to live in Mbare in the 70s, and we used to go to Howman Road in Mbare, and there was running water at that time in Mbare. You go to some of these places in Mbare now, they haven't had running water in over 10 years. And now, a permanent feature in Mbare is the borehole in the city, not in the rural areas, in the city. People having to carry water in buckets in the city. And someone was telling me that to use the restroom, to use the toilet, now people take turns. I was a flashing because water is in short supply. And you know what that means, right? And then we bring the water and flush once. I mean, what kind of life is that in the 21st century, in Zimbabwe, in Harare, in the capital of our country? So the trade-off, guys, if we it doesn't mean we won't help people. It doesn't mean that if we come to a community and there's a need and we have the resources to actually alleviate that need that we want. But we can't trade off. You know, we can't trade that with, well, so if you are the party that doesn't bring seats before the election, then we won't vote for you. We'll continue voting for ZANU-PF. Do you realize what has happened to our civil liberties? When you see a policeman every kilometer carrying, you know, those spikes and everything, and endangering people's lives and throwing that thing at combis, and I have seen 3 so far in the past 2 weeks, which have actually crashed as a result of these people actually throwing spikes and, you know, creating crimes where there are no crimes. You know, they will always find something wrong. Is that what we want? Can you imagine how much of a disincentive that is, even for you know, investment? Somebody comes into the country, they want to start, you know, to actually pour money into a community, and you drive them from Harare to Chekbutu, and they are being harassed. And by the way, we all know that, and we've seen it, people who are white are the ones who are harassed the most by those policemen in the suburbs. They're always stopped because they think they can get money from them. You know, what kind of a country is that? You know, we cannot build a thriving country when we have that kind of stuff going on, and we certainly cannot accept that. You know, let me also say this. You know, someone asked me the other time and said, oh, you've just entered the political fray and so on. You know, then you must not be credible because you've just entered. And I thought, and this was a person who was very intelligent, and I thought, that's very odd coming from a Zimbabwean. Because if longevity solved our problems, we would be in paradise right now with a government that has been there for 37 years. If If longevity is the thing that you use, then we would have no problems at all in Zimbabwe. Actually, Zimbabwe would be the best country in the world because we have the longest serving president in the world. So what has longevity got to do with anything? Who has the best ideas? And we at Build Zimbabwe, we're making this commitment to you. We are committed to having the absolute best ideas and the absolute highest level of commitment to bringing about change in our country and to rebuilding it.
And so I'm not seeing reforms. Just an register kufota tikuona kune vane simba vatange vachigadzira nzira dzekuti vanoda kuti vavote varegister then generation yese vadika tatutaura nezvavavo vanoona kupinda dambudziko rekuregister in terms yemazuva gumi atiri kufota achapiwa kuti vanoregister.
I think mazuva makumi mashanu anditi makumi mashanu per province. That's the last we had. And Mvunzo wenyu, you are quite right. Without reforms, it's a steep climb. We are actually involved, even as a political party, in talking to ZEC and along with other political parties, even the MDCT and others. We have representatives of our party, including our organizing secretary, who engages with them about these things. Now, we know that nothing might come out of that. We might still have the same kind of election arrangement as we have had before, which would disadvantage the people who are in opposition. In my view, the best way to put pressure on any system that refuses to change is to accomplish an unprecedented mobilization of the people. Just an unprecedented, and put so much pressure and demand, even when they open it up then for the registration of voters for those 15 days in your province, at your polling station, show up and actually demand to register. There's no other way. We don't have leverage. If you're outside the system, I mean, what leverage can you have except the support of the people to put pressure on the system to do the right thing? If you're not in government, there's no leverage that you have except the engagement of the people that you're mobilizing in a way that actually really convinces the government for the first time that people are really serious. So my encouragement is, let's talk to others about this. Let's continue to mobilize. Let's have an unprecedented engagement of Zimbabweans everywhere so that they can really see that we as a people at long last are very, very serious. You know, there are some amplified voices in Zimbabwe, and those voices are mainly on social media. And some of these amplified voices, we tear each other up. The question that you asked at the beginning, what about the coalition and all of that? As I said before, we are not opposed to people coming together and actually creating a formidable force so that the people who are in government can see just how serious we are. But you know what? They will only believe that we are serious if it is the right kind of coalition. And now everybody is saying, I want to register to vote. And when it comes to the voting day, I am actually going to vote. One of the things that we were talking about the other day was, on voting day, some people come late. They say, well, that goes in the Makua Mashoma. That's the worst thing that you can do. Wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning because of how important this moment is. And go to the voting booth and right there, if you have to put something on the ground to actually sleep, all of that, guess what happens? Even now the press comes there and sees people's commitment that, you know what, these Zimbabwean people at long last now, they really want change. So my answer to you would be, I think the only thing that we have is the Zimbabwean people being highly, highly engaged. If we can accomplish that, then we'll put pressure on the system to actually reform.
Thank you very much all for coming and making the time to attend this press conference. If you do have any follow-up questions, please feel free to get in touch with us. Dr. Manyika is very accessible. I'm sure you've seen him visiting many parts of Zimbabwe and interacting with citizens. So please do feel free if you have any follow-up questions that you'd like to ask. So again, thank you for attending, and Dr. Manyika, thank you very much. The questions and the responses were really appreciated. I hope you've all managed to get, or you will be getting, a folder which has some material that could be of interest to you. And if you have any questions, like I mentioned earlier, please do feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you.
Thank you.